Affordable housing. So we've heard about the Dubai coming to Kibra in the affordable housing project. The affordable housing has been a conversation in the country now. There is deduction for everybody who's a salaried employee. Pesa inaenda to affordable housing. Is it a reality or is it an illusion? We have with us in the studio an expert in real estate development and a land economist, Gikonyo. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me for this session.
Good of you to occupy the hot seat of the situation. Make yourself comfortable.
Okay. Yes, I'm not going to assert.
Very good. You're an expert in this, in the matter that we are about to discuss.
Yes.
Yeah. People know Gikonyo Getonga, and others know you with other names. What do they call you?
A lot of people call me VG because my first name it's a V. The name is, so I'm called Gikonyo Gitonga, but V Gikonyo Gitonga.
The first name is a V. I'm trying to think. Viscount.
Yeah. Let somebody just Google it. It's a very good name.
Apart from that, what other male name starts with a V?
Vincent.
Victor.
Vitalis.
All wrong.
All wrong.
Yes.
Why?
You'll have to call me for another show.
Vasco da Gama.
Valedictorian.
But simple, just call me VG.
Sawa. VG, welcome to the Situation Room.
Yes.
City has the day's proverb.
I do our proverbs the whole of this week from the country of Burkina Faso.
Mm-hmm.
Death is unable to speak to an ancestor.
Death is unable to speak to an ancestor. VG, when you hear this one, what do you make of it? What's your interpretation?
Death is unable to speak to an ancestor. I think what it means is that after you've died, you can no longer make sense to anybody who was there before you. Was that
After you die,
yes,
you no longer make sense
yes,
to those that you've left behind.
yes,
Essentially, your relevance to the land of the living is limited.
yes.
Little relevance, little consequence.
Limited.
Limited.
Yes,
Yes.
I prefer the word limited. Yes.
Okay.
Because you're still remembered. That's why you have anniversaries.
Yeah. They remember you, but then
That's it.
over time it fades.
Or it fades tremendously. And that's why there's that anniversary. The anniversary is to remind people that these people did exist and this person was significant when he was alive. And we shouldn't forget his significance even though he's no longer alive. Yes.
Okay. VG, introduce us to a land economist. Who's a land economist?
Okay. Actually, a land economist is, at that time, when I studied at the University of Nairobi, we used to do it. We did a degree called BA Land Economics. And the training of somebody to a land economist is that you end up becoming either a valuer, a land and buildings valuer. You can become an estate agent. You can become a property manager. You can become a facilities manager. But the scope of what you can do as a land economist is vast, because you've studied economics, you've studied a bit of law, you've studied about land administration, land management, and now it's expanded to even people who then become physical planners, land use planners, people in the urban development and management sector, city management, town management. So it's a vast way of, it's a very wide degree.
Is it still called land economics?
Unfortunately, I believe that they changed the name. They now specify it and call it, in a lot of universities, it's called BA or a BSc in real estate. So they've now sort of
amalgamated,
and just called it real estate. So at that time, when I was studying for my land economics, there was only one university that was graduating land economics. The University of Nairobi at that time, which we used to try and call ourselves the main campus, which people now don't like. And there were courses in Ghana, and the other places that did land economics was Tanzania and also in the UK. Even Uganda didn't have those courses to teach people about the landed profession. And that's why I call myself a land economist. But actually, I'm more of a real estate professional encompassing everything real estate.
Everything.
Yeah. However,
development
I then studied for a master's in the UK, in a master's MSc economics in urban development planning, housing option.
Okay.
Because that was the time I was working with the government, and I actually started my career at the State Department of Housing. Went to private sector, and I'm now 35 years later. Just
a guru.
Yes, I'm an expert.
He's entrenched.
Yes.
By practice and all.
Yes.
So you have been involved in the real estate development.
Yes.
Right? From planning to developing to selling to in the entire market space. And you've seen the transformation of our real estate sector.
Yes.
How would you describe it over the last 35 years?
You see, when we started, there was a lot of involvement of government in housing. If you look at in terms of civil servant housing, in terms of the National Housing Corporation, in terms of development of housing for police housing, which we are calling institutional. But as we progressed over time, housing lost, it was no longer a priority for government. They felt private sector will do whatever it is to provide the housing. And the only time that a serious shift came was in 2017, when the government, the Jubilee government, then decided that they are going to come up with what is called the Big Four. And affordable housing was one of the pillars of the Big Four, apart from food insecurity, universal health and all that. And that was all came up as a result of a McKinsey study that was done in 2017. So when President Uhuru Kenyatta came into power, he then said, we are going to focus on affordable housing. And I remember going to, being called to the Ministry of Housing in 2017. And the new government had been sworn in, and we were told, this is the new thing. There's going to be the affordable housing program, and it's going to require a lot of the private sector to develop affordable housing, and the government will be more of an enabler, providing the enabling environment to spur development by the private sector. And so we identified various things that needed to be done for government to spur that development. Provision of infrastructure, the major infrastructure, putting the sewer, the roads, power, enabling environment in terms of permit approvals, legislations, and things like that, and then also. So those were the things, and also access to finance, both from developer finance and end-of-user finance. Of course, it had already been recognized that Kenya has 26,000 mortgages, and I think we've gone up. Maybe 5 years ago, maybe it was about 22,000. Maybe it's gone up to 26,000. I know the government have been talking about increasing that to about 1 million. That's an illusion, so that's not a reality. I know what your question asked. So the reality, yes, the government has got a very good intention. 2018, they stated they will build 500,000 houses in 5 years.
In 5 years,
yes.
100,000 a year.
So they relied on a study that had been done by the World Bank, which goes back to about 2016, which stated that there was a deficit of about 50,000 houses per year.
Yeah.
Okay. The big question, I have my own opinion about that, and I think it's
about the World Bank study.
Yeah, I mean how they reached that figure. I think somebody was just trying to push the narrative so that we could get some funding to develop housing, and not necessarily that there was a deficit of 50,000. In fact, somebody made a joke and said, have we had done a census and found that there are 50,000 homeless people? Or what is the study? The big problem we have in this country is that a lot of the population are not living in decent and dignified housing. So when you talk about decent and dignified housing, is do they have sewer? Do they have water? Do they have roads? Today morning I had the benefit of listening to your Kibra, about the task force on Kibra.
Yeah.
I mean, when it rains in Kibra, it's unbearable.
It's a mess.
Okay? And today I was happy to learn that there is a new terminology for some slum upgrading. It's putting lipstick on a pig. I found that really hilarious. So now we are talking about affordable housing rather than slum upgrading and all that. But it's all a question of wanting to put whatever name we want to put it. What is affordable housing? And I think that's a big question that has been at the top of everyone's mind. What is affordable? To whom? Affordable to whom? So what has happened is that the housing that has been developed, and because it has not been enough, has pushed various income down the chain.
Yeah.
And they have pushed the people who would have lived in some of these houses to stay in the slums. So if you look at Kibra, if you look at Majengo and whatever, they did this, what they call slum upgrading project. They allocated it to the people there. But in the end, those people moved back to the slums and rented their homes. So what is their priority? The priority is raising the income levels so that people can get out of poverty. So fast forward, we grappled with trying to understand affordable housing from 2018 to 2022 and how many houses were delivered. I think if you want, there could have been about 9,000 houses in those 5 years of what they call affordable housing. The affordable housing program has been premised on we're building to own, not building to rent, but we're building to own. We want people to become homeowners. And it's a big debate. Do all these people want to become homeowners?
Do they need to be homeowners?
Do they need to become homeowners? When you look, and I'm not saying that I've done empirical studies about this, but the generation, what we call the millennials and the Gen Z, have other priorities in life. They don't necessarily want to own a house. They want to rent a house and rent in an affluent place and put their money into money markets and things like that, and also party. So that's what they do.
Put money into eating.
Those people think of today.
Right.
They don't think about tomorrow. So in 2022, the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto then state they want to build 200 to 250,000 houses a year. So I said, wow.
Up from 100.
Yeah, 100. So the reality, yes, they want to build them. Whether they will build them, that's going to be another illusion. But let's go and start looking at what. So we've talked about 200,000 a year. 2022 was August. We did elections. We're now in August 2023. I don't think we even have 50,000 houses built. And some were completed last year in 2022, but that was things previous had started. So the affordable housing program, in terms of what is intended and what will be achieved, only time will tell. So what we need to look at is to be able to understand what is the government's intention. And I can tell you, even as a practitioner in the real estate, I'm sometimes struggling to understand it. So
you're struggling to understand it
because there are so many moving parts.
What would make it, if you heard the words coming from somebody, what would then make it as a practitioner? Because some of the things that you've told us, then in terms of what you've been able to understand, and one thing that struck me is that, if you're going to talk about affordable housing, you cannot talk about affordable housing without talking about raising the income bracket
Yes.
of any individual who you want to move from point A to point B. So what kind of words coming from the mouth of someone who has a plan, or a group of people who have a plan for affordable housing in a country like Kenya today would make sense? What would make sense if you heard certain things and say, okay, yes, as somebody who understands the system and understands what's necessary for this to happen, this what this person is saying, I can see. Vis-a-vis what you're currently saying now.
You see, the thing is that what has got to be clear is that the government should not be in the business of building houses. And that's where we're going to.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
As a government, you are in. That's not your business. Your business is to enable,
to create an environment,
to put those houses.
Yes.
Let's have the infrastructure. Let's have the roads. Let's have the water. Let's have the obtaining of a business permit or a process or obtaining of a building permit affordable, ease of doing business. Currently, Kenya is operating on a 1968 building regulations. We have been trying to go through the process of developing a new building regulations that will also adopt new building technologies. So we have still been debating, going to workshops. It is now, I think, somewhere in the ages chambers.
Yeah.
But we have not prioritized, let's develop these building regulations. In the 47 counties, the process of getting a developer's permit, a permit to build, is a nightmare. There is no clear, defined process. So if that process can't, bureaucracy, and bureaucracy breeds time, and time is money. Therefore, the private sector are not that much interested in developing affordable housing, because the profit margins are very low.
They're too low.
They're too low. So now government has decided they want to step into affordable housing, and they want to build this affordable housing on land that they have identified.
Yeah.
In fact, what I checked was that they had identified. If you go to the Bomayango, and I would urge a lot of the listeners to go and see what is on the Bomayango. The government has identified 569, I think,
parcels of land.
So that's what they have identified. When you look at the government's intention and statement of what they want to do about affordable housing, they're focusing on saying what will be the impact on GDP.
Yeah.
The second thing they're focused on saying, it will lead to job creation.
Yeah.
The third thing they're saying, it's formalization of the informal sector.
Yeah.
There's not much of saying how they're going to deliver these houses. And recently, it was said that it is not about the housing. It's creating employment. Okay? So,
so there's a lot of confusion. But then, Gikonyo, in a way, I see the government responding to the questions that you raised to them in 2017 when they called you.
Yes.
When you said, as a private sector, if you want to focus on housing, these are the things that you need to do to spur private sector involvement in the housing sector.
Yes.
One, look at land, because land is a huge capital cost. Number two, look at taxes and other incentives. Number three, look at how you also support this environment. So look at what the government is now doing with this affordable housing. They've identified land.
Yes.
And this land is zero cost to the developer.
Yes.
Number two, they say, developers, we have these parcels of land, please bid to participate in these projects.
Yes.
Okay? So when a private developer, then bids to participate in this project, there's the other thing that they do. They say, if you are working on this affordable housing project, there are a couple of tax incentives, right? Yes. There's some tax rebates that you get. Yes. So they've addressed tax. And number four, offtake. With the housing levy, they are guaranteeing you as a private developer, this is what we agree. This is going to be your unit cost for every square foot, and this is how much we're going to pay you per square foot. So you're already guaranteed an offtake and a market. You as a private developer, why would you be complaining?
Eric, I would like to challenge you on that.
All right.
Okay? Because the housing levy has been passed.
Yes.
And the housing levy was passed through the employment, I think the Labor Act. So they're taxing you. Initially, there was to say it was a savings account, it was a savings, and then savings. Then it was passed as a levy or a tax.
It's a tax.
Okay. Mm-hmm. We went towards Parliament and made a presentation to Parliament and said, so that you have this housing levy, what are the regulations of how this levy will be collected? It's been collected by KRA.
Yeah.
But then how will this housing levy or this housing fund operate? Unless you have some inside information.
They said regulations are coming.
Yes. So what happens is regulations are coming. We haven't seen them. So we don't know what it's going to be. So we don't know whether there is a guaranteed offtake. We don't know what it is. So the State Department of Housing has had some discussions and about maybe 2 weeks discussions. They've gone on a retreat. They're going to present the regulations to the what do you call it, to the cabinet, and then they will come, and then there will be obviously public participation and all that and whatever. So that could happen. We've started paying the housing levy. It's going maybe to the consolidated fund, but after that, we don't know how it's going to be used. Okay, so there's been advertisements of various projects that's been done. So even if those projects are done, so are they going to use that fund to fund the development of this construction, or are they going to fund the offtake from a private developer?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That question is still grey.
Yes.
But the other three are not grey.
Yes.
Land available, land cost for developer removed, bid, participate in this affordable housing project. Okay, you benefit from tax incentives, tax and all the other costs removed. So it's spurring private sector involvement in affordable housing or in cheaper housing than what you would go to market with.
Okay. The thing is, there are a lot of developers who have gone for that affordable housing. There are a few who have applied for those tax incentives and have been able to get them. But I don't believe there are more than 10 that have already applied for them. So what happens is that the private sector and even the ministry have stated that the reason why they are coming to play into the affordable housing is they believe only 3% of the private sector the affordable housing is being provided. Only 3% is being provided by the private sector. So they're saying is that the other 97 has got to be provided by government. Now, will government be able to produce the cost of construction at 50 meters, 50,000 per square meter in shillings?
Why is that 50,000 significant?
Because then how much are you selling the house for? Because for a 20 square meter house, you want to sell it for 1 million. Okay?
Okay. Just so that we understand, the 1 million shilling house, the size again is what?
20 square meters.
Okay. What does it look like? Okay, this room that we're in.
Maybe this is bigger than 20 square meters.
It's bigger.
Yeah.
So something smaller than this is supposed to have a bedroom, all the facilities you need in the
20
house.
square meters is 5 by 4.
Yeah, about that much.
5 meters by 4 meters.
Let's define affordable. What do you understand affordable housing to mean?
Affordable is that house that will be able to, it does not have to be that it's got to be owned by the person. What it has got to be, it's also that it can be rented within a certain percentage of the household's income.
Yes.
And also, even if it is not formal income, it is what is even the informal sector. So out of your disposable income after you've paid you've received your gross, there was a rule of thumb when you were being taught in university that you should not be spending more than 35% of your income
on housing.
On housing. So is that affordable? That is what I believe is affordable. But what has happened is that the government has now defined the affordable housing program, and they came up with various income bands to try and say that anyone below 150,000, anyone earning below 150,000, that is the target market of which we are trying to get to call affordable housing. So what we've done is that we have put an income threshold as defining affordable, and then also we have gone further to say that these houses got to be about below 3 million and below. But the number, but now the number has expanded a bit. Sometimes it's 4 million, maybe it's 5 million. So it's an ongoing conversation on what is really affordable.
So then, even if we were to look at that, let's look at both spectrum.
Yes.
Okay, on renting and on owning via mortgage.
Yes.
That's long term. If we are looking at a majority of the Kenyan worker who is in the population, the majority of the Kenyan formal employees are in the 30 to 40,000 shilling income bracket.
Yes.
Right? So 30% of that is 10,000 bob.
Yes.
So we're talking about somebody who is renting a housing unit that is 10 Gs per month in rent. Or if it's a mortgage, it's 10,000 bob a month in mortgage. Would that go into 3 million?
No, because what had happened is even when the housing fund was being promoted, the concept was that the housing fund you'll be contributing to it, and you'll be able to borrow less at about 10%. At about 5%.
Okay.
That was the intention. But now we don't have a housing fund. Okay, rather we have a housing fund, but it's not a saving. It's a tax.
Yes.
So you paid that money, and that money will be maybe used to subsidize the development of the houses, or as you say, it will be used to offtake from the private developer.
Is it specific that tax will be used for purposes of housing only? Is there anywhere?
Until the regulations are in place?
Until the regulations are published?
No, so it's just a tax?
Yes, it's a tax. Just like you have the railway development levy, which is collected to develop the railway.
Although that one has a regulation. The petroleum development levy has a regulation. It says this is how the money shall be used. Can be used to develop the petroleum sector or to subsidize pump prices.
Yes.
This levy is not defined clearly in regulation.
But we will wait to see how it will be defined.
Okay. But even before, as we wait, let me ask the question: how is this thing normally done? I ask from a position of ignorance. Do you put these structures in place first before the pronouncement, or do you pronounce first and then you put in the structures?
Ideally, the way it should have been done is put the structures in place. Going back to 2018, when the housing levy, the housing fund was going to be developed, they wanted to first of all amend the housing bill. So we have the Housing Act. We've got something called the Housing Act Camp 117, which is the legislation that regulates about housing, and it's actually the one that created the National Housing Corporation. So back in around 2016, 2017, we started engagements on how the legislation of the review of the Housing Act should be first done, so that the Housing Act is then done would then create the National Housing Fund, will revitalize or engineer the National Housing Corporation. Because let's not forget, the National Housing Corporation was set up by government going back in 1967 plus to actually help develop housing for the government. It was a government institution. But over time, National Housing Corporation was not properly funded. So it stopped providing funding for housing. And the National Housing Fund, National Housing Corporation, actually had a fund, which what they did was to lend money to the then municipalities and the local authorities, and then those municipalities would develop housing, and they were then meant to repay their grant back to the National Housing Fund Corporation, and then National would start other projects. And if you remember, there was a time, there was a lot of at the onset of devolution, National Housing Corporation was going.
It was claiming ownership.
It was claiming ownership of some of these estates and wanting to then sort of to auction them or sell them and whatever. So, as we're collecting this housing levy, is this money going to the National Housing Corporation, or is it going to a new body that is going to be yet to be created, or is this money just going to government to then use for government to use to develop housing? The big other question is that when you look at the aspects of land and how land is appropriated in this company, how it's given out, is that some of this land is actually public land. So if it is public land and it was a user for, let's say, police housing or agriculture or whatever, have we gone through the proper process of changing the use for that land? And then after that, once the houses are developed, how do you then say that those houses are going to be for only a certain part of the population and no one else, and exclude certain people from benefiting from that? So the housing levy or the housing fund, as we were being told, is that all of us will contribute, but only those people who are below 150
would benefit, and those guys who are from the formal sector. So what happens from those people? The people who are in the informal sector would benefit if they had made a contribution to the housing fund. And now we don't know whether the housing fund is actually, you can make a voluntary contribution or not.
That narrative was not well thought out. It's confusing at best.
The math was not mathing.
No. I mean, you listen to it, you hear it, and the first thing that comes to your mind is a question. And when you raise a question, another question comes up.
Yes.
Because if you segment it, it sounds good. You pay, you can afford, it's like you have paid membership fee.
Cash into later.
Yes. That bit makes perfect sense. But then there's a bit now which sort of like curves into Ponzi scheme territory. So you're not really sure what it is that this money is actually meant for, and somehow you are contributing and it's going somewhere else. Clarity would be necessary and useful in such a situation so that you know.
Yes.
You see, it may not sound pleasant, but now that we know it's a tax, we know it's a tax.
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is the debate about, is it a tax, is it not? Done. But now the clarity. When I pay this money, when it's deducted, how exactly can I benefit from it? Because as things stand, if I have a pension, I can benefit from that pension. I can borrow against that pension right now. But with this one,
confusion.
At what point am I able to? You say you want me to pay 500, for example. What if I'm able to pay 5,000 and I'm able to reach the threshold quicker? Will I be put at the front of the queue? Will I be able to access whatever it is that is at the end of that particular?
That will all come, City.
Yes.
That will all come in the regulations. We are right now discussing regulation and engaging with the stakeholders. Once all that is clear, we shall bring the regulations.
Then
we'll invite you for your comments as well.
I'll pause there, then ask the question, because I was going somewhere with this. You see, all that makes sense when I hear the numbers of houses that were proposed to be built. Then it gives me a chance. When you say 200,000, I feel somewhere in between that 200,000 per year. Even if it's not this year, next year, I will be involved. If not next year, the year after that, I have a chance. But then, reality check. With everything that is being discussed, is it really possible to do that?
I honestly do not see the 200,000 units being built in per year. So far, if you go to the Boma Yangu website, and even you download the Affordable Housing Program, since May 2023, the current or ongoing projects were 9,935.
Projects, that's 9,000
that were ongoing
units.
Projects.
Units.
Yeah, units.
9,000?
935. These are what are stated in there. Then there were projects to be launched, was in the stated at the Affordable Housing Program, was 31,000. And you know, from August, the President has gone, and His Excellency the President has gone to launch various projects. So launching them is maybe there was a contractor who has been identified.
Yeah.
He has broken ground.
They're
or
ready
he
to
will
mobilize.
break ground. And the question is, you will see that they have broken ground.
Right.
You will most likely go to the site and see there is a board showing that there are 31,000 units. Okay? So that in total comes to 77,000 units. Then there was an affordable housing bid round, number 1. This is all in public domain. You can find it. And State Department advertised 59 housing projects. This was either county government, National Housing Corporation, civil servant housing, and NHC. And this was they talked about 800 acres across 22 counties. And the estimated was that the houses that would be built or units would be 66,000. Approximately 66, 138. So we are waiting to see this because the bid does not. They're now evaluating the bid, trying to enter into contracts and everything.
It will take some months.
Yes.
before-
Out of those 59 total projects, 34 parcels in 14 counties had bidders, while 24 parcels did not attract bidders. So 34 has bidders, 25 don't. So what's the success rate on that? I'm not very good in maths.
It's more than 50%.
50%, yes,
Okay.
actually.
So now out of those bids, they've maybe been evaluated. I think the last time by May. By now they should have been evaluated.
Yeah.
Then there were round 2 had 50 parcels of land from 2 counties, 278 acres, 41,703. And then they're talking about 200 units per constituency, which comes to another 58,000 units. So in total, in the pipeline, from what has been built through Affordable Housing Program 1 and 2 and the constituency, the total build is going to be 136. 136,027 units. That's what's been
Total.
built. and
Plus
what
in
is
the
progress.
pipeline.
And even what is in the pipeline, even if they go to tender, and by the time they finish the tender, build approximately 2 years.
Yeah. So 138 housing units in 2 years,
In 2 years.
not 125 per year.
No.
How many houses does the private sector churn out in a year? You've been in the leadership of the Kenya Private Developers Association. You'd know these numbers.
I think there could be maybe 100,000. But also the problem we have is a lack of proper records. And the KPDA has, and this is what we need to start expanding, is to see how many houses are there being built outside Nairobi.
Right.
Because a lot of the focus has been on what is being built in Nairobi. The thing is that those people in the rural housing, and this is one thing that we are losing out. What is our plan for rural housing? Because a lot of people build houses in the rural areas.
Yeah.
The teacher in Siaya, the teacher in whatever, and these people are being told you're going to be part of the affordable housing. But nearly every teacher
As a house.
has a house. He has built it with his circle.
Sure. And
Yeah.
even the person who may not be in formal employment like that, an
Yes.
individual who has a little farm somewhere, has built something, call it whatever you like,
Yes.
but has built something that is his or her own,
Yes.
that they can live in.
Yes.
It all still leaves a bit of not too sure, uncrisp taste in my mouth, because the question still remains that the numbers are ambitious, the plan is ambitious, but the truthful, honest question here is that, is it possible for what has been planned out, bring in the tax levy, whatever you want to call it, or how the money will be brought in? Not a political question, but a factual question here, based on the things that we see, adding all the factors and elements. Is it possible to have an affordable housing project realized with the ingredients that are currently available in the country today? Is it possible?
It is only possible if we found the financing to do it. The other question we need
They said there's a levy, there's a tax.
yeah,
No,
it's a levy.
wait, financing. What do you mean financing? What do you mean? Because
Financing for the
means-
construction,
Yes.
but also the thing is there going to be enough financing or demand
to
for
buy.
people to buy and for people to borrow? A lot of the people who have built their own houses have built their houses incrementally, and they have taken loans from their SACCOs.
Okay.
Yes.
Then would this particular program, if it was anchored, say for instance, in marketplace where you have traders who actually make money, there this what they call SMEs, you call the Uakali associations and so forth, because they're all in associations. People who produce fresh farm produce, all these people who have as a revenue stream, a source of income. Would it then make sense if this scheme was anchored or was promoted with such people in mind, and if they plugged into the organization that these people have, where they put their money?
I think that's what they're trying to do. But they're trying to do that through the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Corporation, which is meant to lend to the SACCOs and to the banks.
Meant.
Well, they say they have lent.
It is.
So practically, this doesn't make sense, Gikonyo.
That's a very harsh statement.
Okay.
Okay, how much sense does it make?
Practically, what sense does it make then with things that we are seeing currently constituted? How much sense does it make? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being it's perfect, we're gonna do this. 1 being you've got to be crazy. Where are we?
What do you need to do to make it make sense?
I think I'll be able to say maybe 4.
4.
Yeah. Okay. Government is trying to enter and provide a solution of which they are not best placed to do. That's not their business. If it is institutional housing or providing housing for police who live in deplorable places, that makes sense. But trying to provide housing to the general public and thinking that they can sell it, it's not going to make sense. The other thing about the whole affordable housing is that it has been driven as a national project. Housing is a devolved function. Every county is meant to assess their requirements and actually develop their own housing. And prior in 2007, around 2018, 2019, the national government was going and signing MOUs to develop housing, collaborated in counties. You know, they go to some county, they went to some counties, and those counties, they don't even own even one piece of land. When they went to Homa Bay, they found 16 acres, which eventually they launched the 15 I think some land there. They went to West Pokot and went to Turkana and some. I'm not talking badly about them, but for heaven's sake. So
where is the demand?
When the governor...
That's a private sector talking. You see,
when you start saying that you're going to build 5,000 houses in West Pokot...
and who's going to take them?
Yeah, who's going to
take them? It's called demand creation.
Okay. There is a question of demand.
Go to Kapenguri and build 5,000 houses. You'll see people occupying them.
Okay.
Gikonyo, thank you for joining us. Gikonyo Getonga is the land economist, is a real estate professional. He's been our guest this morning talking about affordable housing, reality or illusion.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.